The next one's a big one, urgency culture. Again, one that I see all the time, but really just when things get busy, we move away from buyers. And we know organizations are always moving at a fast pace anymore, deadlines, all of these things.
Welcome to the Buyer-Centric OS. Buyer-Centric OS, a system for revolutionary customer experience. With your hosts, Andy Halko and Tony Zayas. This show helps you turn guesswork into growth by putting your buyer at the center of everything.
All right, welcome everybody. And I think we just want to dive right into this one here today because we are looking and examining the four forces that kill buyer centricity and how to fight back. And this is something that is covered in your book, Andy. Four forces. I think this is something that any organization that steps back after we talk about this and thinks about it, these are in play almost everywhere. So where do we start?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that no organization intends to not be buyer-centric. We don't come in the morning and go, you know what, no one cares about our customers. That's not how it works. And so I think that's why a lot of companies, when you ask them, are you buyer-centric? They're going to say yes. They're inherently going to feel like, yes, we are, and we're doing things. And I think what the four forces does is really exposes the natural tendencies within any company that pull them away from being buyer-centric, and oftentimes in a way that they don't even see. And so I think there's an important aspect that they should sit down and really look at this and examine and have a critical view of the organization and these forces to probably have some realization that at least some of them are in effect in a way that is pulling them away from that buyer centricity.
What are some of the symptoms that you see that come of any of these? We can dive into each of them, but what are the symptoms that start to show that can give someone a sense that, hey, we're having, our natural biases are getting to us and drawing us away from what our customer really needs?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, you end up, I think it's the core of the book in a way, is that when you are challenged in the different areas of the flywheel, which is coming in the future, marketing, that you're not being as effective in resonating with your target audience. Sales, we're looking at things where sales is more about meeting quotas and rushing buyers through the process than it is about building belief and trust so that when they're handed off or when they purchase the product, it's a positive experience. Same thing in developing your offerings. What you end up seeing is that really a lack of success in these areas. An organization that's saying, hey, our customers aren't really sticky with our products, or our marketing isn't effective, our sales were, closing a low percentage, our customers are not becoming advocates and referring us. If you're seeing those things, there is a lot of likelihood that one or many of these forces are pulling your organization away from your buyer, and that is, influencing why you're seeing these issues. Yeah. And so I think we can dive into each of these four forces. There's four of them. So organizational gravity, natural bias, urgency culture, and legacy thinking. We could start with organizational gravity. So the way I see this is, it doesn't matter whether you're big or small, this does happen. But it's really the pull of the company and what's going on internally. And so what I typically see is committees. An example that I always use is a client of ours that we had in the past. We would work with them on marketing, and they would have a 7-person committee involved in everything, right? And so we would create a campaign where we're targeting a very specific audience member, one buyer that they have. So our ads are hyper targeted to their needs. The landing page and the experience there is very specific. All of these elements were hyper targeted on the target audience. But then a brand manager comes in and they have an opinion about the look of it, and it shifts. And then they have a product manager come in. The product manager says, you know what, we're not highlighting these features. Why? Because I think those are most important. So all of a sudden, we're adding in things that originally weren't as appealing to that target buyer. And then the CMO comes in, and this is kind of a real story. CMO comes in and says, you know what? I don't think we're communicating our differentiation enough. I think we're so much more special than the other people in the market. And all of a sudden, we went from buyer-centric to company-centric. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is what we think about ourselves, what we care about ourselves. And so in an organizational gravity piece, what you end up getting is things like committees, red tape where things need to get approval before they go out. All of these things like pull us away from our buyer. And so now we may have started out with a campaign that really spoke to their pains and needs, that, you know, really addressed what they wanted, gave them value. And at the end, by the time everybody got through their opinions, we came up with a campaign, or it ended up launching as a campaign, where it was trying to just tell them, we're great. Here's our coolest features. You better love it, whether you want it or not. Right?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think people that have, worked in, I know you said it doesn't matter the size of organization, and I realize it could impact, but I think there are certain organizations that are a little more prone to this. And typically the bigger, the more teams you get involved and the more layers you get involved, I think this is a lot more likely to occur. So yeah, it's all very sounding familiar from past lives for me.
Yeah, you see it everywhere. I mean, it's organizational gravity is real. And, it's interesting how, especially in marketing, but I see it in sales, I see it in product, is that committees, the red tape, some of these other things that happen just pull us away from, and it happens naturally, right? It's like I said, it's not conscious in my opinion. It's the CMO comes in and he's passionate. He thinks like, we are different. I joined this organization because we're different. And I love that. And it's not that he's coming in and saying, I don't think this campaign should be focused on the buyer.
Right.
It's just this, need, right? To want to like give, but it silently pulls us away from what is going to be most effective.
That kind of feels like it almost leads to our next one, a natural bias, because I believe of these, that's kind of the hardest one to deal with and sometimes even see. But yeah, please feel free to explain kind of when we're talking natural bias.
Yeah, I mean, we're, and they overlap a little bit, right? But personal opinions, we just talked about that, or gut instinct, or the loudest person in the room. And it's funny because this one, over the years, I've probably seen the most, is that you're in a meeting talking about, what does our audience care about? And there's the one sales guy, maybe the CRO, maybe the sales guy that's been there 10 years. And he's the loudest voice in the room because he's, in sales, most are, outspoken person. Sometimes it's a CEO. It's crazy to me when we would get in meetings like this and you've got a bunch of team members and everybody waits to hear what the CEO says before they answer. And so every opinion is really filtered through what the CEO said first. And so those are the type of things that come in with bias, right? Is these loud voices, this gut instinct, personal opinions. And it's tough because, again, this one's hard to see because we're passionate. You have a salesperson that, maybe they have dealt with 100 customers, but the 100 customers that they've dealt with are potentially of a specific type. Maybe they built the organization off referrals, and his interactions are mainly with folks that came in and already had some trust and had some credibility, and it was easy to move him through the process. And in his mind, whenever you talk about customers or buyers, this is what they think, this is what they feel, but he had a limited view. And he's not thinking about folks that might be coming in that have no trust, that, you know, just randomly found them on the internet and don't know anything about them. And his opinion is very skewed towards his experiences. And so what you see with this natural bias is it's just, you know, we confirmation bias that we just assume based off of what we've seen before. There's a ton of, in the book, I list probably like 20 different biases. You see them all in this.
Yeah. One that I have seen throughout my career in marketing in particular is marketing team members will look at campaigns or whatever it is, and they'll say, oh, well, I don't read those type of emails or whatever content or whatever it is. And that's fine. And sometimes it's good to get perspective, but if you're not the buyer, it's not that relevant. So it's like a natural, and how do you pull yourself away from that? That's why I say this is the most difficult one, because we're always going to look at things through our own lens. We need to learn additional lenses, but that's what makes it tough.
I agree. And transparently, this one gets me because, I sometimes we're doing things and I'm like, I don't. And, you know, it's funny because when I'm in meetings like you, soon as I hear a client say, I cringe, right? Because I'm like, okay, well, that's you, but, you know, we're not trying to sell you. We're not trying to build a product for you. And so it's interesting. Especially that retrospective of, you know, I'm sure you've sat in meetings and said, damn it, Andy is saying I again.
Yeah, and I've done it as well. It's like, I think everyone is guilty of this because we're always going to give input from our own perspective. So it's definitely one that you're going to deal with. It's tough, but
it's hard to beat.
The first step is awareness, right? Like knowing that it exists.
Well, and that's where the framework comes in. You know, the rest of the book, which is about building an operating system, is that you go beyond just recognizing the problem and you build systems into the organization to fix it.
Right.
The next one's a big one, urgency culture. Again, one that I see all the time, but really just when things get busy, we move away from buyers. And we know organizations are always moving at a fast pace anymore, deadlines, all of these things. Again, I typically see it is that in early stages, we'll talk about the audience and the buyer. You know, it might be planning user experience for a product. It might be developing a website. It could be, you know, the sales process. But then once you get into it and there is a need to get it completed, the website has a date that we're going to go live. The product, we now have to build all of these features and organize the team, and everybody's moving really fast to get something done because there's pressure from the top to launch new features. All of a sudden, everyone forgets about the buyer. They forget about the audience. It's not brought up. I've seen this, especially as we've done websites over the years, is first 3 weeks, we're talking about the target audience, what they want, get into design, and all of a sudden it's like gone. Those conversations disappear, and that natural bias actually comes in and some of that organizational gravity.
Right.
But urgency culture is a big thing. We're moving fast, and, you know, when we want to get things done, it's kind of easy to forget about like who we're doing it for.
We revert back to those natural tendencies, and that's the bias. That's the layers of red tape, or the person, you know, that is at the top of that red tape that's making all the decisions. And yeah, it has a lot to do with that urgency causes us to behave a little bit differently. And if we don't have the systems in place, it's going to impact kind of what you're doing and moving away from buyer centricity.
Yeah, and that's really what it is. Again, is that systems allow us to, stop at intervals and have a litmus test of, are we still aligned with the buyer or not? And if we don't have that within what we do, I talk about it in the book a lot, buyer drift, like you're drifting away, because none of these things are these sharp turns. They're slow movements that we don't even notice, but they're moving us away from who we're trying to sell to, who we're trying to influence, engage, convert, close. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And then our last one, legacy thinking, this is a couple of things. You typically see it with folks that have been in the organization for a long time. Or the other piece that we put in legacy thinking is sometimes leveraging our best customers versus a subset of lost deals or quiet users. I see that one a ton, is that you go into an organization, we start talking about audience, and the only people that come to mind are the customers that you had the best experiences with, the customers that engage the most, the ones that have been with you the longest. But once you start asking questions about, what about that customer that came in for 6 months and then disappeared and canceled? Or what about, all those folks that started the sales process and ghosted you? Or the users or the customers that just don't say a lot. Maybe they have been customers for 15 years, but they just don't speak up. And so what I typically see is that, again, these kind of overlap into that bias piece a little bit, is that, it's this legacy of what we know has worked in the past and what we know has worked for our best customers becomes our only, viewpoint. And that's really, really bad for a company. I mean, if you think about it, when you want to do marketing, when you want to think about sales, when you want to think about evangelism for retention and getting referrals, you need to be thinking about those people that said no, that, didn't like what you had, that never would refer you, because you need to understand them to make changes to your offerings, your marketing, your sales, more than you need to think about your best customer who just loved it. And just, one other quick thing. I mean, it's funny. I have a number of clients where, they built their company off of some core relationships. A majority of their clients are X. And it's a real challenge because they view their buyer through these 4 clients that were, family friends or old colleagues. And that is just really unfortunate, because it really drives people in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. And that's why you put the system together. And that's why we're going to go deeper into a lot of this. But these 4 forces, hopefully this is, if you're tuning in, has triggered you to kind of think a little bit about how these forces are at play. And again, as we go on in this show and in Andy's book, The Buyer-Centric Operating System, check it out. It's on Amazon. It's available now. It goes into much more detail on how you guys can work through this stuff and implement a system that will get your organization at that point of buyer centricity where you can hum along and perform at levels that you never did before. So thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.